Good afternoon. This is Quintus Curtius. Welcome back to the podcast. It's been a while since I've done a podcast. I usually, on the weekends, write an essay, but sometimes it's fun to articulate points orally through the spoken word rather than the written word. So what I wanted to talk about today was the effect that success can give, the reality that success often gives you more work than less work, and how that dynamic plays out in reality. And I thought of doing this because I was in a conversation in my building at work this past week with some other individual, and he was talking about how his goal is to, once he gets to a certain measure of success, a certain amount of income, or amassed a certain amount of riches, he wants to just check out and go retire on an island or whatever, or some other place, and kick back in the sand and enjoy the good life and sort of while away his hours in sort of a pleasant idleness. And I didn't really do much to rain on his parade, but I thought to myself how in life it really doesn't work out that way. Things don't happen that way. I mean, everybody talks about that. I think many of us have these types of dreams and delusions, but in practice it never seems to actually work out that way. In my experience, more success gives you more responsibility and more work. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you know how to maintain that escalatory balance in life between work and pleasure and moderation and balance. You can manage the increased workload and stress load. It's just that you have to change things. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how this process works and how we see this illustrated. And when I was talking to this guy, I was reminded of a parable I had read recently. I'm trying to go through some of the Gospels here in the Bible. I was never really a big Bible student, really at all. But as I've gotten older, I found it, especially the King James Version, not only is it really pleasant to read from a literary perspective, but there's just so much richness and lessons in there, and stories and sayings and parables, that it really appeals to one's sense of work experience, let's put it that way. You just see things. It doesn't mean as much to you when you're younger as when you're older, when you had a chance really to chew on life and to really see how things play out. But I wanted to talk about this parable, which is in Matthew chapter 25. And I'll just summarize it briefly. Basically, it's a story. Jesus tells a story of a man who goes on a long trip. And he says the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. That's this phrase, kingdom of heaven, is a frequently recurring phrase, which we can interpret that in a secular way if we want. But anyway, he called together his servants and told them to manage how he wanted his money managed while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one servant, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last one. And this allocation was apparently made to these 3 individuals in proportion to their abilities. In other words, he gave more money to the servant who was more capable, and less to the servant who was incapable. So when the man came back from his trip, he called together the servants and asked them to account for how they had deployed the money during his absence. And the man who had gotten 5 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags to invest. I earned 5 more." And the master was very happy about that. He says, "That's great, good work, let's celebrate together." The servant who had received 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags. I have earned 2 more." And the master was like, "This is great, good work, good job there, let's celebrate together." Then finally, and you know what's coming, you know what's coming here. The servant with 1 bag of silver came and said, "Master, I didn't really do much with your money. I was afraid I would lose it, so I buried it in the earth. But here it is, I'm giving it back to you." And the master was not pleased. He said, "You worthless and wicked dunce, if you knew that I harvested crops why didn't you at least get me something in return for this money, or take it to a money lender? I could have gotten some interest on it, blah, 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 blah. So finally, the master said, hey, look, take this money from the useless servant, give it to the one who has 10 bags of silver. To those who deploy well the resources that they are given, even more will be given to them, and they will have an abundance. But those who do nothing and put in very little effort to maximize what they have, they're going to get nothing, and that'll be taken away. Now get rid of this useless servant, throw him into the darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And this is Matthew 25, I think, verses 14 to 30. So anyway, the lesson is, of course, that those who put to good use the things that they have, who make maximum use of their resources at their disposal, they will eventually have an abundance. But those who are idlers, those who do nothing, they're going to, not only will they continue to get nothing, what little they have will be taken away. They'll end up with a negative value. So I think that's important. It's easy to say, well, that's common sense, everybody knows that, but I think this type of parable really says a lot, because it turns on its head this modern self-help mantras that we hear from people about how you have to seize your goal. You get to this end state, where you are going to be able to finally just the FU money. You can just check out and go off and just drink a caipirinha on the beach and put your toes in the sand and have a drink in your hand, and everything's going to be great. You finally reached it. And all this attitude of multiple passive streams of income, and that's all fine. That's all fine, and that's well and good. I get that. You have to give people something to shoot forward, and I think people should try to maximize their income level and earnings and do whatever they can to get ahead. But do not think that somehow, if you get more successful, that you're going to reach this end zone. You're going to be able to just slam the football down and do a tap dance and it's all over and you're going to be on easy street. It doesn't work that way. Trust me. Believe me when I tell you, it doesn't work that way. The more successful you are, the more things that you accrue, the more abundance that you attract. Generally, well, not generally, always, the more work you're going to get, the more responsibilities you're going to have. And that's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing. You just have to cultivate different skill sets in order to manage that new state of affairs. When you're a private or a corporal, for example, you're going to have very different perspectives and very different responsibilities than if you're a general. The increased responsibility brings with it a whole new set of problems. So you have to learn as you get older and more successful how to recalibrate yourself, to learn new skills and maybe unlearn old habits that will not suit you well in this new environment. So that's the point. That's really what we need to wrap our minds around and really need to come to grips with, because it's the type of lesson and it's the type of advice that really doesn't get as much currency today as it should. Everybody's focused on, this imaginary, I'm going to be on easy street. If I only had this, if I only had 5 million or 10 million or 50 million or whatever, everything would be great and I would be able to just check out and reach the end of the line forever. And life does not work that way. Stop seeing life. Stop seeing things as this end state you have to reach and then everything is good. See life as a continuous process of learning, relearning new things, unlearning old things, growing and adapting to changing circumstances. Because if you can't adapt, if you can't deal with changing circumstances, you're going to lose everything. Just like that third servant that was cast into the darkness, where there was great wailing and gnashing of teeth. So that's all I wanted to say today. This is Quintus Curtius. Until next time, have a good weekend.